Today I have three representatives of the Ionics company who graciously volunteered to appear and be quizzed by me as to their roles and remembrances of their times in the industry. On my far right I have Curt Gollrad, who worked at Ionics for many years and retired, I believe, as an engineering manager. And next to him I have Arroyo, who did not start his career at Ionics, but was at a competitor for a while, the Bermuda company. And then John Arnold, who came from the UK. And so he and I speak the same language, pretty much. To start at Ionics in the very early days.
When I was in Bahrain, I had the luck to go over to Saudi Arabia, and I saw the first really pilot plant with Aramco at Abqaiq in Saudi Arabia. And Ionics people had gone back and forth there for months and months and months. And, you know, it was producing potable water, and this was an area way out in the middle of nowhere. And they were basically shoveling out scale every morning and replacing membranes and keeping it going. And one of these guys eventually went over there and said, you know, they noticed that you could dissolve the scale in acid. So why don't we feed some acid? And lo and behold, they fed some acid, you know, and the scale stopped forming. And then they went back home and read the basic textbooks of water treatment and found Langer index. Yes, this is the key. And that was the first time that, you know, the technology started to be moving towards the water treatment industry.
My feeling was that the real transition from, or the real introduction that Ionics took to leap into RO occurred not with brackish water RO, which would have competed directly with EDR, but with an opportunity to put a seawater RO plant in the Canary Islands. And so we had previously put an EDR plant in Canary Islands using brackish water sources there. This was on Mas Palomas on Gran Canaria. And so the next plant came, I think, under the sales effort of Kay Kachadurian and the people who were our sales forces in Spain at the time, and in Europe, where we had a lot of representation, and we had a Talba as an engineering firm in Milan. So I think that was our first leap, and it was sort of like jumping into the deep end of the pool. But we put a plant in there. I think it was a very successful project. The plant went on to be expanded in the future. But so we didn't really jump in a place that would have competed directly with EDR. We went to seawater RO, proved that to be a success. Mm-hmm. And then I think there was a later conversion that we continued the seawater RO ventures by going to Santa Barbara.
Well, actually, in those days, you know, for a couple of young guys just out of college to start a company based on something they'd been doing in school was pretty unusual.
Yeah.
Well, and also it was, I think as far as I know, one of the very early prime examples of venture capital, because it was started with a venture capital by
American Research and Development.
Yeah,
General Dario, who was head of the Harvard Business School, was really one of the instigators.
And they remained investors in the company. When I started there, Fred Clay was the fellow who was in charge of
the design guy.
Design and drafting department. And this was at the time when the very first calculators, and the Wang calculators where you put the little card in, came out. Fred said, don't use that. He had me go he gave me a design manual for the electrodialysis from the very fundamentals of it. And he had me sit down and design the plant, you know, using the equations in the design book, and, you know, understanding the basics of the process and doing it all by hand. And then he said, you know, after that point, you then you can start using these calculators which have the equations embedded in them, and they were absolutely crude by today's standard, but they were a leap. And as is true today, now when you can look at your GPS on the car, you sort of lose the ability to understand a map or a marine chart.
Yeah.
There's at least that potential that you can have that problem.
Right.
It's a unique product. It's a unique product that we sold a few projects in Spain, Aguila, also, and the brewery, big plants. And the unique thing to Corona, this is the key part. What Corona is doing, the other brewery was watching. And they come Polar from Venezuela, Cristal, Peru, Paraguay, Heineken, and they was duplicating those projects. From the water point of view, compare the ion exchange, the Arroyo, and ED. If you have the water quality, like brackish water, and you need that water for brewery, for instance, where you don't need a very distilled water, the ED play a very important thing, because no chemical involved with the water feed in the process, never in touch with the chemical. Because when you put some chemical, you put in the brine section, brewery like that.
Yeah.
And that was the unique thing, that they want some water product for beer production without touching the chemicals.
They really put a lot of effort in the early days in the municipal market in Florida. I think you directly were involved. And the key there, they recognized that market, and the market was really selling this package to water treatment and general contractors, and identifying those type of contractors throughout Florida, so when the bids came out, you were all aligned with the guy who could win the job. And that became, I think, in the total industry of people identifying segments, niches of the market. And Ionics really concentrated in that and was very successful in the brewery area.
A fairly significant lead on the RO business in the number of small units you had located in North Africa and the Middle East and so on. How did you service? I mean, this is not like they're all in one place. You got little plants, here, there, and everywhere. How did you support those?
There were two eras basically in the overseas smaller units that got to be larger. I moved to Libya in 1960, and I was there 5 years basically. And when I arrived, there were 2 or 3 small ED units, and when I left, there were 35. And they were in the Sahara Desert. And you talk about markets, the oil industry developed, so there are oil companies with big centers in the Sahara Desert, and Ionics had plants at all these centers. The other segment of the market were the drillers, and then you came to a different breed of cat when you were drilling with rigs and operators and the rest of it, and I used to fly out to these rigs, and life was tough. I thought I'd really seen the tough life. And then the ultimate market that came along were the pipeline guys. And I've never seen such hard-living guys, 8, 10, 12 months at a time, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, stringing pipe across the Sahara Desert, making a fortune and spending it the next day. And Ionics concentrated on that. And then a lot of that small stuff, the other industry, I remember servicing stuff in Aden in the early 60s out of Libya with the soft drink people. And that was another sort of service. And literally we had 6 or 8 guys who roamed the world.